Hello and welcome to the Psych Leadership Podcast, the show that helps you understand the psychology of growth, leadership, and making big moves in your life and career. As always, my name's Luke Upchurch. I hope today you're having a fantastic day. Welcome to Season 2 of the Psych Leadership Podcast. So if you recall, we finished up 2025 talking about resiliency, how you bounce back when you feel like quitting. Well, today we're going to build on that a little bit and talk about managing up. So how do you work with your boss's personality? And where that connects, by the way, is that when we talk about burnout, a big part of what makes us feel burnt out, what makes us feel maybe less resilient, is if we don't feel that we are being fully supported in our jobs. So your boss plays a big role in how your everyday work life feels. When they're clear and supportive and treat you like a real human being, well, work can be pretty enjoyable then, right? But when they're confusing, if they're micromanagey, if that's a word, right? Or seem like they're annoyed every time that you ask them a question, well, that's where we get into a space of it being a little bit miserable. And if you're early in career, or this is your first job in this particular company, or a new venture where you're working with a new boss, you might be thinking, how do I even handle this? Well, there's a right way to communicate without sounding needy and annoying. And the good news is today that's what we're going to talk about. Understanding your boss and working with their personality instead of constantly bumping into it. So first we need to break down a little bit, a couple psychological terms when we talk about how we assess somebody's personality. You may have heard this concept called the Big Five. It's like a personality roadmap, if you will. So I won't get into all the details, but there's 5 big things that we look for when we talk about somebody's personality. I'm going to run through those for you so we can build some foundational understanding here. So first, there's the openness. A person's openness, it has to do with how emotionally available they are to big ideas and new ways of doing things. Then we have their conscientiousness. This is how organized they are, how scheduled they are. Somebody that has sticky notes everywhere versus somebody that maybe has everything sort of scattered in their mind, but not necessarily on paper, right? We have their extroversion. So this is somebody that wants to talk it out, have meetings, hallway chats, that whole thing. Agreeableness. This is the person that their tendency to avoid conflict or keep everyone happy. And then we have neuroticism. This is where stress shows up fast, their urgency, their anxiety, all those things are built into that. So most people have a mix of these different traits, and it's kind of on a continuum, if you will, right? So I'll use openness as an example. When I think of my own leadership style and how open I am to big ideas, it kind of depends on the situation, and it depends on how you present them to me. If you present those ideas to me in a way that says, let's collaborate, let's talk about this, I value your opinion, those kind of things, that makes me feel pretty open. If you come in and say, this is how we're doing it, I didn't ask you any questions, just get on board or get out of the way, well, I tend to be a lot less open in those situations. So that's an easy example, but when you think of your own, where you fall on those 5 things, where you fall on that continuum, understand that every person, every day is fluctuating just a little bit. We tend to lean more towards, really open or less open, really agreeable or less agreeable, right? That tends to be our neutral space. And if we're looking at this from a physics standpoint, an object in motion tends to stay in motion, right? So we tend to have a equilibrium. We tend to have a balance of where we normally live, But again, that doesn't mean that folks can't operate around that. So as a, again, to use myself as an easy example, although I am typically fairly open to new ideas and new ways of doing things, I also recognize in myself that the approach is going to very quickly close that door or keep it wide open where it normally is. Okay? So let's walk through some real examples when we talk about where your boss is. Um, because we need to think through this so that you can get a feel for where are they on those top 5 and how do you navigate within that space. So first example here, your boss responds to emails with quick 1 or 2 word sentences. So they you ask a question or they ask you for something and they say yeah or got it or something like that. They don't have any extraneous details, no emojis, no emotion attached to it. So in that example, they might score high on conscientiousness because they want a structure and bullet points, right? They don't need the fluff. They want very quick answers. Okay. And so by understanding this, that allows you to know a little bit more about their communication style, but also kind of how their mind works. Okay. And we see this a lot when you're talking about folks that are at that director level, that VP level. They they might be okay with the long-winded conversation if you were sitting down and talking about your kid's baseball team or something like that. But when it comes to business, that side of their personality has high conscientiousness. They want this to be very bullet point, straight, get me what I need so that I can move on, so that I can get to my day, so that I can make a decision. So I notice, especially in the younger generations, folks tend to get a little torqued up about this, right? If, for example, if my boss reaches out to me, or well, let me use a different example here. If I reach out to my boss, I typically am going to say something like "Good morning," and hope you had a good weekend. By the way, I need this thing. And so because that's my style, because yes, I'm organized and those kind of things, but I'm also very agreeable, and I'm also very, I just talked about being open to new ideas and things like that. I'm the type of leader that I'm trying to create psychological safety with my team. And part of that is meeting them where they are. Part of that is understanding that much of my team is that younger generation that is going to need a little bit more than just quick 2-word sentences, right? So because I need that, and because I know my team needs that, sometimes that's how I approach it with my boss. I can't be upset if he doesn't necessarily reciprocate that, right? He may still come back to me with very quick hit responses because that's his personality type. And so it's a two-way street here. First off, I need to consider changing my communication style specific to him because I know that that's not what he wants. That he is highly conscientious and wants those quick things. But I also need to make sure that I'm not getting my feelings hurt, that I'm not taking that personal, because my boss not throwing in emojis and having a lot of back and forth with me isn't necessarily a reflection of my work or of our relationship or how he feels about me, etc., right? We tend to let the self-talk, the self-doubt get in our heads, and we get a little torqued up about that. Okay? So let me give you another example. Your boss loves brainstorming, but rarely wraps things up. So high openness, but they might not be great at organizing those thoughts, right? So that's kind of a high openness, low conscientiousness. So they want the ideas, but structuring them may be a challenge. And so how do you deal with this? Well, it's okay to take that next step, to say, to when I've dealt with this in the past, I really try to lean into the openness of that leader, because that means that they value your opinion and that it isn't just my way or the highway kind of situation, right? So lean into that. But if you know that the timeline and the structure and the next steps is not their forte, it doesn't mean it has to be yours. It just means that you can't necessarily expect it from them, right? It's an old adage. This is often credited to Einstein. I don't know who really said it, but if I judge an elephant on its ability to climb a tree, I'll forever think it inferior, right? You can't I can't be mad at a person for not operating in their normal spectrum. And so in this case, if your boss's openness but conscientiousness isn't their strong suit, you can't be mad at that elephant for not climbing a tree. You need to find some way to bridge that gap, to lean into that. And whether that's you making the timeline of the next steps or collaborating as a team, just be aware that your boss may not have that in them. Okay. So again, it's okay to push on that a little bit and to understand where they're coming from, but not to get torqued up about it yourself. What if your boss is highly extroverted and maybe you're not? Right? I've told many of you on these conversations in this podcast series that by and large I consider myself an introvert. It's introvert versus extrovert, similar to our five big personality traits. Those are on a spectrum. And so if I am an introverted person and I have a boss that's an extrovert, they might want to pop into my space just to have a quick chat. And especially if I'm not in that day, if I'm feeling very introverted, right? Them doing that completely throws me off my game. And in some cases, it might actually distract me from the progress that I'm trying to make. And not only that, it's, I don't know about you, but if I'm really in a mode, if I'm really focused on a given task, that gets me to the space of almost being irritated, right? That I'm in the middle of something, I had my door shut, I had my headphones on, you see that I'm doing something, how dare you just pop in, right? And I don't mean that to be mean, I just mean that's, for my introverted listeners out there, you know exactly what I'm talking about. It completely throws me off my game. And so how do we deal with this? How do we manage up? Well, you can encourage your boss, hey, listen, I'm right in the middle of something. Can we schedule some time for this? And you can also take the reins there. So it's okay for you to say, I will schedule some time, or hey, let me find some time on your calendar. That kind of puts you in the driver's seat, right? If you ask them to find some time, you can't be upset if they find time that maybe you already had in your head that you were going to do something else, right? So I would challenge you to take the reins on your own, and in that moment, push back on them. Hey, let me schedule some time and we can talk through this. And in that schedule, especially if you find yourself really introverted, it's okay to build a little bit of a buffer for that small talk. Right? I've worked with folks in the past that they get their energy from interacting with you. And so if we flip the script here, if you are really extroverted and your boss is really introverted, sometimes an extrovert will sort of get torqued up. They'll get their feelings hurt, their toes stepped on, because they want to talk and somebody else doesn't want to. And so that extrovert, especially if they struggle with any kind of anxiety, any kind of self-esteem issues, immediately they think, well, shoot, my boss doesn't even want to talk with me. Am I doing that bad of a job? They don't want to hang out with me. They don't want to hear about my weekend. Well, it might have nothing to do with that. I mean, don't get me wrong. Maybe you pissed them off, but maybe, just maybe, they're on a completely different side of that equation. All right. So, again, I am introverted myself, but I know that my team is extroverted for the most part. And so I like to interact with them that way, but I have to do it on my terms, right? As an introvert, I have to sort of plan for that as in terms of booking the time, but also booking that space in my own head so that I can. I don't know about you guys. I actually practice that a little bit. Maybe this is some of my my closet autism coming out, but I actually plan for those conversations. So I think to myself, okay, so and so has 2 kids and loves hiking, etc., etc. I can ask them about that. That'll get them talking for a few minutes and take the pressure off me so that I don't have to say much, but they can scratch that extroverted itch and I can live in my neighborhood over here in introvert land, right? So, in any case, these are just some examples of how you can push back and manage up a little bit with your leadership. So now let's continue this conversation into the space of looking at relationships as an opportunity. So there's something called a leader-member exchange theory, and basically what this says is that the better the relationship with your boss, the more opportunities you get. It doesn't and it's not it doesn't mean that you have to suck up or be fake. It just means that someone who communicates clearly, is reliable, helps the team win. That's and leader. That's leadership, even if you're not a leader, right? So it's it puts you in the light of I may not have direct reports. I may not be a leader in terms of I'm a leader of people, but I'm still a leader, right? And there's a distinct difference there. Uh, so understand that by knowing these personality traits in your boss, that puts you in the driver's seat in terms of being able to move up. So 3 moves to start managing up today. First off, try asking about their communication style. So directly ask your leadership and encourage your team members. If you're a leader, encourage them to ask these questions to you, or maybe just offer them up proactively. So, hey boss, do you prefer quick updates, or should I check in with you only when I hit big milestones? Right there, you just reduced their stress and yours. Another move here, you can anticipate their timing. So, what part of the week did they get overwhelmed? You can finish one thing early and offer support after that, right? You're unlocking trust points here. You can also ask for feedback along the way. So, hey, before I keep going, boss, am I on the right track? That's short, it's safe, it's smart, and most bosses love the initiative, but it's also showing your humility that you understand that maybe they have a different mindset here. All right, so speaking of mindset, let's talk about a little bit of a shift. So, when you're managing up, it's not about trying to impress your boss. You're learning how to understand human behavior and how to lean into that behavior. You're practicing leadership before you get the title. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is powerful. That's really how careers take off. So, as a takeaway here, if you're struggling with your boss right now, don't just hope that it gets better. I want you to start experimenting with communication. Observe how it works. What tiny shifts can you make throughout your day to change that spectrum, right? How can you understand where they're at and meet them where they're at instead of trying to force them to be something that they're not? All right, folks, that's all the time we had for today. If you got something out of this, share this episode with a friend for me, especially if they are new in career, just started a new role. And seriously, be sure to reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'd love to hear your real stories, and I'm here to help you grow. We'll talk soon, friends. Have a great day.
Hey, you made it all the way to the end of the podcast. Thanks so much for your time today. If you like this content, I'm going to ask that you consider a small donation. Every little bit helps, but this allows us to continue not only doing the podcast, but actually offering the internship positions, the leadership conferences, as well as the in person courses that we deliver to high school and college students. Think about hitting the donation button for me. And again, we'll talk soon. Bye bye.